Greetings to the brightest audience in the country and welcome to the Dominic Enyart Show. Today we are continuing our series on chastity. Chastity is the virtue of sexual morality. And if you are chaste, you are sexually moral, but if you are unchaste, then you are sexually immoral. And the rule of Christian chastity is that sex belongs to marriage with complete devotion and faithfulness or else total abstinence. And so in this series, I'm attempting to demystify the issue somewhat, perhaps for some Christians, but primarily for non-Christians. And some people might have noticed in this series that I haven't been going to the Bible as much as I typically might. And the reason for that is that we know what the Bible says. We've covered it enough to know that the Bible says that we should be chaste, that we should flee sexual immorality, but now we are trying here to explain why the Bible says these things, why chastity is important, why Christians try to be chaste, and the benefits of chastity. Now, I've done another series on chastity, which you can find at kgov.com/chastity, in which we took a deeper look at chastity, it was a more biblical look at chastity than what we're doing here, which is probably more important, and hence why I did that series first. But in this series now we will be taking a look at this from a biblical perspective, what the biblical material is on the subject here soon, perhaps on tomorrow's show. Because after all, the main reason that we should be chaste is that God, He wants us to be chaste. That's the main motivation. But chastity does also have a lot of other non-spiritual, non-religious benefits, and you can get these benefits on the side. These benefits are, byproducts of following the Bible and obeying Christ. And so the benefits of chastity, there are many. There are very many. We are currently recording. This is the 5th episode in this series on chastity. So literally, I can and I have been able to talk about chastity and the benefits of it for hours now without slowing down. And I'm going to continue with that here today. I mentioned last show that the damage that sexual immorality, the damage that can do to our brains, it's so severe. And I was talking about how chastity can protect you from that. Chastity can protect your brain. And that's how cool the Bible is, right? You follow it, and then the advice of the Bible, it literally protects your brain chemistry. And that's because the Bible is a pretty awesome science book. But now, on the last show, I said I was going to show some images of brain scans. And these brain scans, they were of porn users versus drug users, and we wanted to look at the similarity. We ran out of time, and I want to do that today now. But before I share that side by side, I would like to explain what we're looking at. We're going to look at some brain scans here. And so the University of Cambridge in England, they put out a groundbreaking study. This was back in, I don't have the date here, but it was about 2017, if I recall correctly. And this neuroscience study, it finds striking similarities in brains of porn users and of drug addicts. And now the study, it found strong evidence of sensitization in compulsive porn users. And sensitization is hyperreactivity to cues that lead to craving and then to use. And so to put this all simply, porn users become super sensitive to things that trigger them, which that then gives them the seemingly uncontrollable urge to look at porn. And so this study, by the way, it was actually an immoral study. I am not condoning this study because in order to perform it, they had to take people and they did brain scans of them when they were looking at porn. And so they should not have encouraged nor allowed these addicts to watch porn, even for the sake of the study. You do not do evil that good may come of it. But so this study, they conducted this study, and they exposed both non-users and users to pornography. And when they did that, they were doing brain scans, and the reward section of the brain, it lit up. And as we discussed yesterday, sexual immorality, last week, it is a cheap substitute for the real thing, and it's a shortcut to the chemical reward center. And so we'll see this reward center. It's lighting up, and we can throw this up on the screen here. And that's what we're going to see, and that's this is called the enhanced circuit reward activity. That's what this is called when this happens. And if you're just listening, you might want to check out the YouTube channel, the Dominic Enyart YouTube channel. By the way, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you are on YouTube. So looking at this, what we see on the top here is we have healthy volunteers, and on the bottom, we have porn addicts. And so on the top, their reward center, when they are exposed to pornography, it's firing off a little bit, not an insane amount, but just a reasonable amount, about what you would expect. And then on the bottom here, we see porn addicts' brains when they are exposed, and it's scary how massive the reaction to the exposure is here, way more than is normal. And so when someone is addicted to drugs or alcohol, you will see, and you show them, you take brain scans of them right as you show them, say, a beer or some meth or some heroin, some drugs, whatever it is, and the brain scans of the porn users when they're exposed to porn is the same as the heroin users when they are exposed to heroin. And it creates a remarkably strong urge and desire to seek after it more and more. The brain chemistry with pornography, it's identical to that of, a drug addict. By the way, the study found, and it's almost so intuitive and obvious that it's not worth mentioning, but the study found that this urge, it's dramatically stronger in teenagers, and that's because teenagers, they have greater spikes of dopamine to release. And remember, as we discussed last week, that dopamine is the motivational brain chemical. A lot of people think it's the happiness brain chemical. It's more the motivational brain chemical. And so when these addicts, especially these teenage porn addicts, when they view pornography, they are getting a biological cue, a very intense biological cue saying, hey, you should do this. And those chemicals, in many cases, are very overwhelming. And it's wild to me that kids are they're not allowed to do drugs, but they are allowed to watch porn. That is absolutely wild. Aside from the morality of it, which is obviously that's the main thing. But aside from that, you'd think you could make a really solid argument that porn should be illegal just from the addiction and the health side of things. It's just so damaging. And so the other compelling finding in this study is that compulsive porn users, they craved porn more and more, but they did not have higher levels of enjoyment than those who were not addicts. And so porn users, they find themselves wanting and needing more and more porn, even though they don't even necessarily enjoy it. They don't like it. And so this finding, it fits perfectly with the current definition of the word addict, of addiction. And so that is why porn, it is an actual addiction. It's a chemical addiction. And so I also, so that was the one brain scan that we looked at. I also want to show this other image, and this is a side-by-side image. And so all the way on the left here, we have the brain scan of a healthy, normal brain. That's what your brain is supposed to look like. Brain scans, by the way, you use a giant machine to get a brain scan. It's called an MRI. That's what you use to perform the brain scan. And the MRI, that was invented by a guy named Raymond Domadian. And we actually had Raymond Domadian on the show here at kgov.com. Just go to kgov.com/MRI to check out that show. And by the way, I guess I'm going on a rabbit trail here. But a cool thing about Domadian is he is actually a Christian. He's still alive. He's a Christian. He's a scientist. And he is specifically a young earth creationist. He does not believe that the earth is millions and millions of years old, which that is pretty great. And he is correct, by the way, the earth is young. And so there are a lot of atheists and evolutionists who attack Christian young earth creationists and say, hey, young earth creationists, they never make any scientific advancements for humanity. which is just a very silly claim. The fathers of the modern sciences, they were largely all young earth creationists. They were Christians. Right, like Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was a devout Christian. Regardless, Domitian, he is still alive. He's a young earth creationist, and he invented the MRI of all things. And so remember, next time you think that Christians, don't make good scientists, just remember that the guy who invented the MRI, he is a young earth creationist. So kgov.com/MRI. Super interesting show. Anyways, thanks to Dr. Domitian, we now get to see these brain scans of, on the left here, we have the healthy user. In the middle, there is a heroin addict. And on the right side, there is a porn addict. And so the one on the left side, there's nothing wrong with it. That's what you expect. That's what you want to see. And then in the middle, the heroin. On the right, there's porn. And the similarities of these, they are really scary. The two addicted brains, they look extremely similar to each other, and they look nothing like the healthy brain. So people, do not watch porn. Porn will not only will it hurt your soul, it'll also destroy your physical body. It will hurt your brain chemistry. And so if you think that porn is not scary, just remember that it is my generation. We are the lab rats of this porn experiment. We are the first ones to be raised on such high, intense levels of pornography that are so readily available. We are the study that humanity will look back to in 500 years from now to see how we reacted. And you know how we look back and we think about meth, and we think, oh, meth, that used to be legal. That's kind of insane. You used to buy that over the counter. That's wild. Well, I believe that is how porn will be seen in the future. They'll say, what, were they insane? They were letting their kids watch porn? They were letting anyone watch porn? That is wild. That's how they're going to look back on porn in 500 years from now. Right. Now in 2023, the average 12-year-old, they are able to go online and see more attractive naked women in an hour than the average, most well-privileged, unchaste monarchs of the past could in their entire lifetimes. And that is a problem. That is scary. Humanity was not designed for this. So yeah, don't watch porn. Be chaste. Chastity will protect your brain. All right. Okay. Now, that's not even the main thing I wanted to talk about on the show today, but that already ate up a big chunk of time. I actually today, I want to talk about taboos, and specifically taboos around sex. Which taboos we have, which taboos we have lost, but most importantly, the taboos which we need to restore, the taboos which we need to bring back from the grave. And so there's a lot of value that taboos bring to society. By the way, a taboo, there are 3 forms of social oddities. I believe the first one is a faux pas, which that's just like kind of a minor misstep in the social world. I don't recall the second one. Maybe we could get our crack research staff on that, on the 3 social oddities. But then that's the most minor one. And then there's one which is a little bit more severe of a social violation. And then finally, the most severe of the social violations is the taboos. And taboos are very severe. You do not commit taboos. Typically, people are weirded out by them. They're grossed out by them. And so with these taboos, there's actually a lot of value that taboos bring to society. And not a lot of people consider how it is that taboos came into being. They don't consider why it is. They don't consider why do we have these taboos? How did they originate? What is the purpose? And why did people institute these taboos? Why did people make these taboos a thing? Because there usually are reasons for taboos like this. Taboos don't typically just, come into existence out of nothingness. There's usually some history behind the taboos. There's usually a reason why it's there, right? A fence in the wilderness, if you stumble across it, there's probably a reason that it's there. It's probably not just there completely, it didn't just, a tree grew in an odd way to form this weird fence. No, that fence, it was put there. And so too with taboos. Taboos are like a fence. They are usually put there for a reason. And it's worthwhile to understand why we have these taboos. And so we're going to talk about all of that in just a second here. But before we do, I want to mention exciting release here from kgov.com. The Plot by Bob Enyart, the second edition, is now available for purchase. Just shortly before Bob's passing, he managed to finish all his edits for the second edition of his life's work, The Plot. When reading The Plot, the Bible becomes easier to understand. Apparent contradictions plague so many Bible students. The Plot demonstrates how hundreds of such contradictions disappear when the reader merely applies the big picture to the Bible itself, to its details. Tunnel vision, it focuses so narrowly on a problem that the solution often lies just out of view. So join Pastor Bob in The Plot, Pastor Bob of Denver Bible Church, as he teaches Christians how to use the entire counsel of God to understand the plot of the Bible and solve biblical mysteries. All right, now, we got a comment on the last show. This is from, interesting name here. This is from Big Red Rock Eater. And so he asks, it would be awesome to address arguments for chastity as it relates to elderly widows and widowers that have no prospects for sex within marriage. Think of nursing homes and what often goes on there between consenting elderly adults. The spiritual arguments hold, but so many arguments for chastity are based on the risk to present or future marriage, risk of pregnancy, to children born outside of marriage, etc. And so that's a good point to be raised. What about the people who are not going to get married? And we covered that a little bit. But first of all, I just want to say that elderly people, they're allowed to get married too, right? There's nothing stopping them from that. But secondly, taboos. Taboos are crucial when thinking about this topic. And taboos, this will apply to everyone, not just the elderly, but it will apply to everyone. And so we are going to talk about creating and upholding taboos. And so what are some taboos that we have? Why do we have them? And how did they originate? Well, concerning chastity, a very clear example of a healthy taboo that we have in society is incest. That taboo is great, and it's still relatively powerful. It's being attacked a little bit, but it's still relatively powerful. It's so powerful that when I mentioned it just now, I felt a little weird saying that word on air. But now with the taboo against incest, what is the purpose of that taboo? Well, humanity has been shown to have genetic defects. And the defects, we inherit those from our parents, and then we pass those same defects on to our children, plus a few more, because with each generation there are more and more defects. And so when we pass those defects on, if we can find someone with wildly different genes than ours, they will likely have the fix to our bad genes, and then we will likely have the fix to their bad genes. And so that's why you try to marry people outside of your family. So when you have kids together, the genes, they work up, they sync nicely. Yet, if we have children with someone from our own family, our genes will be so similar that we will likely pass on both the bad genes without having a fix for them from the other set of genes. And so when they have kids from within the same family, those kids, they're usually really messed up. It's really sad to see. And so to protect children, society has installed this taboo. And that we think relationships between family members, we think that romantic relationships between family members are really, really weird and really gross and illegal most of the time. And that's a very healthy taboo. That's very good that we have that. By the way, that taboo, it did not exist thousands of years ago. The gene pool was strong enough that it could handle kids from interfamily relationships, and it wouldn't really cause any problems. And it was only when the gene pool was so messed up that that taboo was installed. And so you can thank the Bible for that, by the way. Taboos, they are installed, they are, put into place to help society. And now it should be noted that even if there are a couple within a family that is, say, they're infertile and they still want to be together, it's still weird. It's still gross. We still think it's gross. And why is that? Why do we think it's gross? Well, because the strength that taboos have, even when the taboo doesn't apply, we still think it's gross. That is the power that taboos have. And it's actually important that even infertile family members, that they don't get married. That's important even in those cases, even when the reason for the taboo doesn't apply. And that's because even though they are not going to have kids, even then, they still should not get married, and they should not get married for the mere sake of upholding the taboo. That taboo helps society so much that it should still be upheld, even in cases where the reasoning does not imply. The strength of that taboo is so important that it needs to be strengthened in all situations, not in just situations where it applies. By the way, porn attacks the taboo of incest with vigor. It tries to tear it down. It tries to tear down that fence, which is remarkably foolish. It is remarkably foolish. So that taboo, that is an example of a good taboo that we should have. We should reinforce that. And now, there are other taboos that have been destroyed primarily by the sexual revolution. For example, fornication, right? Sex outside of marriage. It was at least frowned upon here in America. And say adultery, you used to be able to be put to death for adultery here in America, even right here. But that is no longer really the case. And now it's to the point where you can commit adultery, you can cheat on your wife, and become the president of the most powerful country, of the US of A, baby. And so it's like, it's ridiculous that this taboo, it has been destroyed. It doesn't mean anything anymore. No one really cares. And it is my opinion, it is my belief that sex outside of marriage, it must be, again, turned back into a taboo. It must be turned back into a taboo. It should be shameful. It should be very shameful, not just for women. I know a lot of people complain there's a double standard that, women need to be a little bit more shamed than men for sex outside of marriage. But it should be shameful for both men and women alike to have sex outside of marriage. That should be shameful. We shouldn't think about it. We certainly shouldn't do it. But actually, get this, in an ideal world, in like the perfect world that we could try to create, in an ideal world, sex outside of marriage, we should be slightly grossed out by it. It should make us uncomfortable. We shouldn't even like talking about it. It should make us, kind of uncomfortable, kind of similar to how you feel when someone brings up incest. That should make you feel like a little bit weird. And we should be grossed out by it. And that makes sense because sex outside of marriage, that is a cheap substitute for the real thing. And we should be a little bit weirded out that someone would be willing to settle for a cheap substitute of the real thing. And so it should be returned to being a taboo for the sake of young people, for the sake of people who want to become married, to protect their marriage prospects. And just like how the purpose of the incest taboo doesn't apply to infertile family members, so to chastity, that might not apply to, say, some elderly folks in a nursing home who don't want to get married. But even still, even then, even in those situations, those people would still have an obligation to uphold that taboo. Also, like I said, elderly folks, they're allowed to get married as well. There's no rule saying that there's a cutoff age on marriage. But so that taboo, everyone would have that obligation. And that taboo, it should be created and then upheld, even though the primary reason for it does not apply necessarily in every situation. Of course, there are many other benefits which we have detailed throughout this series, but even if those benefits don't apply, even then, you should still uphold the taboo. And now, to create this taboo, a no sex outside of marriage taboo, that's a pretty hard task. I won't deny that. But it's difficult, but it's definitely impossible when we keep doing the very thing that we are trying to discourage. If we keep doing it, then we will definitely never have this taboo. But if we stop doing it, then we might just have a chance at doing it. And by the way, I don't think that this is as impossible as a fight as everyone says it is. Those of us who believe in chastity, those of us who strive to be chaste, we tend to have a very negative, like, oh, there's nothing we can do type of outlook. And that's really sad to me because I feel somewhat optimistic about this fight. I feel that we can, maybe not in our lifetime, maybe we can't win this fight in our lifetime, but I think that we certainly can make a lot of ground in our lifetime. And that's something that it's worth fighting for. It's worth some blood, sweat, and tears just to gain some ground in our lifetime. I think it's worth fighting for. And I think if we put effort into it and say, I think we could probably save maybe millions of marriages. But let's say in our lifetimes that everyone watching this video, we all fight for chastity. And let's say we save 1,000 marriages. Let's say we just do that. We will do way more than that, but let's just crazy lowball it and say that we will have, save only 1,000 marriages, real lowball number. If we do that, those 1,000 marriages, that will have such a remarkable, tremendous positive impact on not just the next generation, but on the rest of eternity. The rest of eternity will be better for that, dramatically better for that. And that small bit of fighting, that will yield so many extraordinary results. And so I think with chastity here, this is one place where we can really make our punches count. And so it's worth fighting for just for that little bit, but I think we can make a lot of progress. And so personally, I am encouraged and I want to encourage you. I think this fight, it's not a waste of time. It's not like we're just, wasting our time here, but we can actually make some big changes. And so, part of the reason that I feel encouraged is that history often repeats itself. And sex at one point was hushed up. It was a taboo. You didn't just go around talking about it so openly and freely. I feel like, I do a lot of work at coffee shops, and it's not too uncommon where I overhear people talking about it in public. And it's like, oh, that's like, I feel weirded out by that. Like in my heart, I feel like it's a taboo just in my own little life, but it's not a cultural taboo. People feel so comfortable to talk about it. But I think we can hush it up a little bit. I think we can make it so it's not just a casual thing, because at one point in the past, it was private. It was taboo, and you wouldn't just hear people at like Starbucks talking about it or whatever. It was exclusively between married people. And actually, C.S. Lewis, he said something on the topic. Here's what he said from Mere Christianity. He said, quote, "They tell you sex has become a mess because it was hushed up. But for the last 20 years, it has not been hushed up. It has been chattered about all day long, yet it is still in a mess. If hushing up had been the cause of the trouble, ventilation would have sent it right. But it has not. I think it is the other way around. I think the human race originally hushed it up because it had become such a mess," unquote. And so C.S. Lewis, he said that in 1952. That was over 7 decades ago. And so now let me ask you, with 9-year-olds, with them having more access to naked women in an hour than monarchs of old would have in their entire lifetimes, with that as the state of things, Is sex, is it more of a mess now or less than it was in 1952? Of course, more. Of course, it's obvious. Of course, things right now are a disaster. Since Lewis, since he said that, it has become 10 times worse, 100 times worse. And it has been talked about and advertised. It's spread around like chicken pox, right? You can't watch an NFL commercial for, a hamburger without it being shoved into your face, something inappropriate being shoved into your face. I went to a B-dubs a few weeks back when the Avs were winning the Stanley Cup, and I went to watch the game, and the commercials, they were so sexually charged just for a hamburger. It's like, it's a hamburger, yet we are still getting this shoved in our face. And so ventilation has not set things right. Ventilation, if anything, certainly it has made it worse. And just like C.S. Lewis said, because of how big a disaster it became, it was hushed up. And so I am hopeful. I think that as it is becoming a disaster, I think we can do that again. History repeats itself. History just has this uncanny way of repeating itself. And I think it can be hushed up again. I think we can change things. We can turn it into a taboo, and we can protect young marriages. But change starts with one, and it starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with just one person, and right, we can't wait for others to come in and change us. We can't wait for the laws to change around us. That's just not going to work. We have to make a commitment to this. We have to make a commitment to chastity. We have to start by being chaste ourselves. We have to be the ones to start this, and then others will follow, right? Courage and discipline are contagious. And so if we grab that torch, I think others will follow along with us. Hey, that is going to do it for me here today. I'm out of time. Join me again tomorrow on the show for Chastity Part 6. And I'm going to try to wrap up this on the next show. I think that'll be fun. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell if you are here on YouTube. Also, check out Mount Moriah, Evidence for the Resurrection of Jesus Christ. We will have an end card linking to the end of that on the end of the show today. I've been going through that a few times recently. It's absolutely mind-blowing stuff. Hey, I'm out of time. May the Lord bless you, and may he make his face to shine upon you.